because it's about this A Spiritist View. We cannot say it's the Spiritist View because who knows, you know, it could be many things. But according to the research we've done, it's possibly to this direction, according to the latest revelations of the spirits, because Spiritism is a revelation. It's considered the third revelation, as in the book that is sold out. That's good. The Gospel According to Spiritism. Sold out. In that book, we get to know, and then in the Genesis, Kardec's Repeat, it's the last book he compiled, and there he talks about the Spiritist message being the third revelation. Moses brings the first revelation of God's laws. Jesus comes and extends it, second revelation, and Spiritism comes and seals it. Not that it does more than Jesus did, but it brings it to us with a new understanding. As he said, I cannot tell you everything, but I'll send you the promised consoler, and then you'll be able to get to know more. In other words, of course. He didn't even say it in English, so he said it in Aramaic. So what is interesting for us is that this is everything to do with I Honor My Parents campaign, which is there as a fourth commandment in Moses' law. We say Moses, not saying Moses brought it, but in the revelation brought through his mediumship, because he was a medium. And if we don't honor our parents, we're in trouble. Not only our children, we are children of parents as well. And many people, when we launched this campaign in Baltimore, at Kardec Radio, also at the Spiritist Society of Virginia, and elsewhere, people have come and said, you know, how can I honor my parents if they were this, that, or the other, or they were abusive, they were not very considerate? That's their problem, not ours. When the law says honor parents, it says it's about you and them, not about them and you. It's your part of it, our part. But to honor, when we read chapter 14 of the Gospel According to Spiritism, he didn't say to honor is to agree, saying, yes, I love my father and my mother because they abuse me, I love them. That's not normal. To say I love because they did that. No. Saying I love them in spite of it. That's healthy, and that's true honor. Respect them, meaning they have the right to be who they are. Be reverent when they need us. And never turn our backs to them and say, I don't care, I'm never going to call you. There are times in which we may have stress, but we always work again. This is the beauty. This is the beauty that only Spiritism brings to us, because it explains why. Now, knowing that parents and children are not together by chance, the question now to a more modern topic for us. People have been asking, what do we do in regards to parenting when our children are so exposed to so much media content? It's about the TV, the internet, and so magazines, cartoons. What do we do? Do we have a role there? Or it's like everybody's doing it, so I do it as well. Every parent gives them an iPad, I'm going to give them an iPad too. Really? What should we do? Should we do something? Or is it just like, let's go by what everybody else is doing? Because when we go see that in ancient Rome here, if we were doing what everybody else were doing, we can tell by the end of the book 50 years later, when Emmanuel discloses what happened to people when they really went by what everybody else was doing. It's a little bit dramatic, not to say tragic. And the spirits like André Luiz, like Emmanuel, Amália Domingo Soler, Amélia Rodrigues, Manuel Filomeno de Miranda, they tell us, yes, we wish it were that simple. Because nowadays, what we know is that when we're exposed to what's happening in the world, what do we find? Nowadays, science is telling us, especially the scientists in general, in regards to pedagogy, education, the American Pediatrics Academy or Association is telling us that our society nowadays is pushing our children to live a life that is similar to a man who lived in ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, he was a hunter. He was a hunter, and he had so much beauty. He was so handsome that he disdained people who loved him. People would come to him and say, oh, they would be mesmerized, hypnotized by his beauty. And he would disdain. He would disregard their presence. He wouldn't care. So arrogant he was, because he was great. He was handsome. Until one day, one of the gods, they named the god Nemesis, was the god to bring justice on those who were arrogant. So he made a way to bring this hunter close to a lake that reflected very easily, much like a mirror, at a time when mirrors didn't exist, of course. Otherwise it would be easier. Go to the bathroom, see yourself in the mirror. But in this case, brought him to a lake. When he would, for the first time, look at himself on those reflective waters. When he saw that image, he fell in love with the image. He didn't know, says the story, that it was him. Because back then they didn't have physics to explain the whole 9 yards of reflection. So he couldn't stop looking at himself upon those reflective waters. He didn't eat. He didn't go anywhere. What happened to him? He died. What is his name? That's exactly where our society is pushing our new generation nowadays, to become much like him. The pediatrics are telling us that we are pushing our children to be just like him. Not about self-love. It's not about, loving ourselves. It's about being obsessed about ourselves. We're being pushed in our society, and society is pushing our children through the parents who are not aware that it's normal to teach our children that life is all about them. In previous generations, they say, it didn't exist. Why? Because life was much more difficult, much more labor-intensive. There were so many kids. Each family had, I'm not going to say at least a dozen, because that's too much, but it could be almost that way. So there was no time to say, you're the best, because there are 10, 11 more. And there is no time. Life is so difficult, so hard, that we don't have time to really concentrate on those superficial things. Much like when we go to Africa today. People don't have time to be in this narcissistic level. Much like many billions of people who are living on this earth and don't even have a bathroom. Imagine a mirror. They don't. But a shorter part of it that has more financial power, intellectual power, is nowadays living the syndrome that is called the narcissistic syndrome. It's so critical. It's so vital to understand this because pediatricians say narcissism is on the high. They say in the beginnings of the 80s, 1 in every 7 children would be clearly very narcissistic because there are psychological tests to tell how narcissistic we are. And nowadays they say 1 in 4 kids. And this is probably very optimistic, 1 in 4, because if we go to any school nowadays, you could almost tell, if not everyone, you could say 1 probably in 4 is not that narcissistic. Because nowadays that's how it is going. So just so we understand what narcissism is all about. There are some traits, and the main traits, the main features on the narcissistic trait is when somebody's too self-absorbed. What is it? Somebody who just thinks about themselves all the time, the whole day. It's like, what do I need? What do I want? What is important for me? What do I don't like? This is self-absorption. It's all about me, everything. I go here, it's about me. I go there, it's about me. I go somewhere else, it's about me. And I only do what I like and what I want. Believe this is what it is. And they are very defensive. Of course, they have to preserve their self-absorption. It's much the teenage attitude that we have nowadays. Then they don't forgive easily, because anything that is threatening their narcissistic input is pushed away, and they're like, no, I'm never going to bring it back because it's going to hurt my main plan, which is to keep myself in my cocoon of self-absorption. And they are very self-sufficient. There are many more features in this trait, but we concentrated on the main ones. Self-sufficiency is not a bad thing, because independence is important. The problem is when somebody refuses to receive help from others, thinking that they should be self-sufficient to deal with all of their problems. And that's a problem. Many teenagers are committing suicide today due to this. Who has never been bullied? It is rare. Very rare. Should everybody kill themselves because they are bullied? How much of a victims are we? Is the person who is being bullied also narcissistic? We don't know, but it is possible. Because if somebody is bullying me and then I try to kill myself because I don't accept it, why? Why not? Why not? Why not just let it happen and it's outside the door? Not saying it is easy, but there is a problem there as well. Spiritism could explain what is on the behind the scenes of bullying, because nobody is a victim. And if I get out of myself, I get out of the victim position, everything else just unfolds much more easily. That's another story, though much of what we're going to talk about today is going to bring back the bullying issue as well. Because if our children are exposed to so much out there, they will be exposed to that type of interaction that may come back at them in a hurtful way. This professor at Harvard, Dan Kindlin, he is a professor at Harvard School of Public Health, and he has written this book, besides others, fascinating, because he talks about our generation. The book's title is Too Much of a Good Thing, Parenting Children of Character in an Indulgence Age. And that's what's happening to us. The bottom line is we're living in a time in which we're overindulging. We're giving too much to our children of everything. More than we should. Food is just one element, but it's about everything else. And he says, and I brought only 4 so we can read in the book, but he talks about 7 syndromes of indulgence. One being self-centeredness, another is anger, and we see today children who are angry and we think it's normal. It's not normal. It's not normal. Or teenage, it's normal that they are angry. Depends on the frequency. And he says some of them have this obsessive ambition. They would do anything, no matter how legal or illegal it is, to get what they want. To be millionaires, or to have a car, or to have a tennis shoe, whatever. It's a syndrome of indulgence. It is a feature in the narcissistic trait. It is there. And they have lack of motivation because they think the world has to give to them everything. It's like if they don't get anywhere. But who created this generation? The previous one. And it's probably there in the previous generation. Some of these features. Because we're feeding the new with features of the old. So we cannot blame on this new generation. Somebody raised them. And the lack of motivation is probably there. Nowadays I'm an adult and I may ask this very question. Oh, is it probably that I am living this life because my parents didn't do this to me? Didn't give me that? So that lack of motivation, which is always blaming on somebody else for not getting this or not giving that, is in that generation, the adult generation of today. This book talks about this and much more. He's not alone. Dr. Kindlin is not alone. There are many others, and we would like to share another one that goes on the same line. Another expert in the field, Madeleine Levine, and she wrote this book, The Price of Privilege, How Parental Pressure and Material Advantage Are Creating a Generation of Disconnected and Unhappy Kids. She says, we're creating a generation that is all about me, she says. That's our generation. They may come to our homes. They may come to places. And they don't walk calmly into places. They don't observe. They don't respect. They get in. They do whatever they like. They say whatever they please. And it's all about, can I have this for me? Can I do this? Can I, and can I, and can I? This is a new generation that everywhere they go, it's always about them. And parents are overprotective and overindulging. This is what's happening, especially in the United States of America. But not only, it's mostly about the Western world and developed countries. That's where we're heading, and we are at the time. It's very worrisome. And then we may be asking, what does it have to do with media parental monitoring or control. If they're going to be exposed to this generation, if they are not like the generation, is that worrisome? Is it a problem to expose my child to environments in the media, whether it is in the TV, the internet, a magazine, that is raising this mentality? Is it a problem? Am I going to deceive myself thinking, no, they're going to be there, but they're not going to become one of them? That's very naive, because the human nature is such that we are influenced by others. We suffer the influence of others. No wonder Emmanuel told Chico, live amongst the ones who know less, so you teach them, and with the ones that know more, so you learn from them. But are we preparing our children to be in that mindset? Yeah, go to school. If they behave that way, be prepared to give them a hand, but don't be like them. And whether when they are amongst people who are wiser, don't dismiss, learn, absorb, respect, be reverent, because that's going to play a role in your future as well. That's the minimum. Spiritism will tell much more than that. Much more than that. So this is what is happening around us. And who is creating this generation all about me? Society. Who is society? Us. But the families. Because the people who work on the TV stations, the radio stations, work for the magazines, they are parents, or they are people who have family, and they are raising their family that way. So we're talking about us being in the middle of everything. Do we want to be a generation all about me? Because that's the millennium generation. It's the new generation that is considered to be the generation all about me. Are we like this? Because Narcissus didn't have a beautiful end. No wonder suicide rates escalated. Narciso also died. It was almost like a suicide. Some versions of the myth say it was actually suicide because he couldn't live without looking at that figure on the lake. So what is going to be the end of the generation all about me? When we read this book and life goes on, we get to know about stories of people who were quite narcissistic, and their end was not easy, much like other books that we read in the Spiritist literature. So this generation is the generation of the social networks. We cannot refrain and tell them, like, don't get in, don't have an account, depending on their age, because Facebook is for children who are 13 and older, not younger. Not younger. It's too much to handle. A mind who is not that age yet to handle all this generation about me on Facebook. And the question is, Facebook, there are so many. I just brought some, but if you see, there are so many. There are people who are encouraging people to create social networks. New ones. And there are. And they create just for their circle. And it's not Facebook, it's not Twitter, it's theirs. And if you go Google it, you can find a way to create your own. We could create like a Spiritist one, maybe to be a little bit more selective, right? But you know, something like Facebook, But should we? But who is? Let's talk about the number one social network, which our children are more exposed than ever. Facebook. Some numbers about Facebook. Who uses Facebook? 11% of the population on the earth. 1.2 billion people. That's it. But who are these 1.2 billion people? 98% are still adolescents. Neuroscience says that we're still considered to be an adolescent until we're 25 years of age. 98%. And I have a Facebook account, and I'm not in this number here. What are we doing there? Because it was created by a teenager, and it was created based on something that was very personal. And our children are exposed to this. Should we monitor it, control it, supervise it, or not? 98% are in this age range. It's high school level. It's college level. Much like that behavior. Majority of people on Facebook, how do they behave? Their pictures, where they are eating, the dishes they are eating. This is really like high school. For adults, it doesn't belong there. Oh, I'm eating the greatest ice cream. For teenagers, it's okay. For adults, it's strange. And science says that there are some adults who have unresolved high school issues. And now they're using these mechanisms to go back, and they say, play a role, now being the cool person that they couldn't be when they were in high school or in college. How are we going to monitor and supervise our children, what they are behaving, their attitude on Facebook, if we have that type of attitude? Oh, I'm here in the greatest place on the earth. So, how old are you? 50. Oh, high school, it's for high school kids. If we want to supervise our children, we need first to observe ourselves, how we are using these social networks to know how to supervise. Because some parents would think it's okay to incite vanity, pride, narcissism in their kids. It's okay to be narcissistic on Facebook. It's all about you, right? And it's a lie. In 365 days, how many smiles do you actually take a picture of? Maybe on some parties, some. If you count 10 a year for people who really go into more greater parties, and then you display only those. What for? We're talking about the teenagers. What for? What is that all about? How we're going to tell our children, do this, don't do that, if we behave just alike, as childish as they do? We're saying this nothing personal to us, but we're talking here because we are multipliers that can share with others, saying, hey, don't be on the sleep state. Because the sleep state is like this: I do what everybody does, somnambulically. And I don't think about it. I don't reason it. How much really should I take pictures of my family and put on my network that I have for people that I don't even know, for them to see my picture? We see people who are mediums in Spiritist centers president of Spiritist centers, taking picture without a t-shirt at the beach. This is not being Puritan or hypocrite. It's just about coherence. Of course, none of this will tell their children, don't be narcissistic, because they are. But should we be like that? Should we be as childish, as high school, as they are, our children? Does it belong there? For example, let's talk about a dialogue I heard the other day somewhere else. A child coming and saying, oh, I like this about Brazil. I remember getting this from a Brazilian market. And the other kid saying, yeah, I've been in Brazil recently, and I've seen this and much more. We listen to this type of dialogue, and it's like, okay, it's childish, right? Who has seen it? How much you've seen it? But should we approach those kids as parents and say, look, why you're disputing something? Because where do we stop the unhealthy competition? From an early age. So, talking about this, exposure of our children to the media begins in many ways, but one of the main things is the social network. It's very difficult, very complicated, but it's true. What would be then the Spiritist take on the narcissistic attitude? For sure, you know the answer. We know it. It's not complicated. Spiritism says all along, no to pride and selfishness, which are the two main things on narcissism. Me, mine, my, no. But we think it's so beautiful, the concept, not to be proud, not to be selfish. But when our kid is disputing a toy with another, we think it's okay. When they're competing with another teenager about something, it's okay, because they should be better. And how many families we're seeing today, they raise their kids that way, their kids become adults, leave home, their next competitor is going to be their parents. Because when they get married, they have their children, or not, even if they have a single life, they look back and it's always about, oh, the way my parents live their life and the way I am creating it. No wonder St. Augustine said, whatever you do to this child is going to come back to you. It's like Frankenstein. You create a monster, and the monster comes after you. And that is true. It will come, and it has to come, because it's about action and reaction. The book by Andrea Lewis. It's exactly about it. There's no other way. Emmanuel says, the best savings account is education to our children. Because that's going to be most likely, not only, the way through which we're going to be reincarnated, but not necessarily. Because depending on what we do, we're going to be reborn in the enemy's family. And not in our family, no matter how good we treated them. But we will be forced to be born there. When we read the end of this book 50 years later, they talk about how they are going to reincarnate, right? It's like, oh my God, now the woman who had nothing to do with that family is going to be reborn with those people, and those people with the other people. How come? But they are that family, and this is going to happen to us. Let us not think that this is going to happen to the neighbor. It's going to happen to us. So our children need to learn from an early age. Don't be full of pride. Why do you think it's all about you? Don't be selfish. But we need to give example, like practice ourselves. The Spiritist take is unmistakable. It is clear. No to this way people are creating. Does it mean we're going to tell them don't get a Facebook account? Don't go on Twitter? Don't watch TV? No. We're going to ask these questions and many more. We're going to go and adopt Jesus' model. Be in the world, not of the world. He's our guiding model. Even in that parenting issue, though he was not a parent, we can say, when Kardec, in question 625, asked the Spirit, so who is our guiding model on the earth? And they said, Jesus. They didn't say, he is our guiding model for all the men, but not the women, because he was in the body of a man, right? How can he be a guiding model for women? People can claim. How can he be a guiding model for people who are married if he were not married? We're not going to dispute the latest news, whether this or the other. But how can we have him as a model for parenting if he was not a parent? How can we listen to Allan Kardec if he was not a parent either? Because you don't need to do something to give the best example on how to approach anything from a universal perspective. Whether parent or not, whether married or not, whether a child, a woman, a man, a senior person or not, Jesus brought to us universal features that we can adopt in our lives. So we're going to adopt those features to bring upon a Spiritist view on media parental control. So André Luiz says, in this book that is not in English yet, Conduta Espírita, Spiritist Conduct, the home is the first school. And he says, provide to your children the foundation of a solid, well-guided education without fear and fantasies. Solid. Solid has nothing to do with fashion, because that's passing. I stopped by today to buy something at this department stores, and I gave a quick glance at their clothes and the fashion. I was like, man, where is this going to? Because it's so strange, the colors, the things, etc. It's like, and it's going to change. Next season you come, everything else is different. The colors, the formats, and I don't even know the terms. So solid has nothing to do with passing. It's something that can happen at every generation, that they can pass on to their children, and their children to their children, and so on, so on, and so forth. Well-guided, meaning unmistakable. It's a good GPS. It's always going to tell you it's to that direction, the north is that way, and it's always going to be that way. It's not like, oh, today it's this way, but tomorrow may be something different. And has no fear and fantasies. No fear, no fantasies. It's not about becoming the best NBA player, becoming Bill Gates because of the money, or becoming the president of the United States because we think it's so great to be not knowing the responsibility that it intakes, or to be a CEO. Oh, my job is going to be a CEO. And these are fantasies, because if they have to happen, they will happen. The Spiritist teachings tell us it's all about the reincarnatory plan. If it is there, it is there. If it's not there, it's not there. You work and achieve it. If not, it's not going to be there. We don't need to worry, stress ourselves out. Look at the story of the slave Nestorio 50 years later. He did a great job. He helped people being a slave or a freed slave that was still treated as a slave in so many ways. But he helped so many people, many more than the mayor of the city who was messing up with everybody and was killed in a horrible way by his own wife. So it doesn't matter. What matters is without fear and fantasies. Some people say, oh, we're not going to help the poor people because if we do, we may have problems. That's raising our children with fear. Don't see children who are disabled because that's shocking. That's fear. We're passing on that fear to our children. It's going to come later back to us because we'll be in charge of fixing it. So where do we begin? And Andrea Lewis replies in a message in the same book. Begin it by avoiding giving your children names that are simple, by avoiding giving names that are not simple and natural. And I will purposely stop and fix because it's very important not to make mistake here. That are not simple and natural. It's quite interesting that Andrea Lewis says that we should give simple and natural names, avoiding this pompous, famous names that can embarrass them in the future. Oh, Napoleon. Oh, you're Napoleon. You're this. Or Michael Jackson, Paul McCartney, and you were born in a country that people didn't even know the name. I mean, what for? It's interesting because it's so unexpected that Andrea Lewis would address this issue in a message about Spiritist conduct before children. So giving them normal names, natural. It says natural names. Natural, that is not going to embarrass them in the future. See, this is charity too. Because they will suffer at school. And later, who knows? When they get married, we think school is where bullying stops. You get another school, marriage. And there you can be bullied as well by your partner. And if not, by the relatives, or by the neighbors, or at work. So it's like a long life of being embarrassed because, what's your name? Napoleon. Are you Bonaparte? It's Napoleon Bonaparte. And he may well be. We never know. So it's very charitable from the spirits telling us this great advice that seems so simple and common sense, but not quite nowadays. Like giving the name of my child, Apple. Apple? Yeah, it's like Apple. It's like, what is in the mind? I remember Sueli Carla Schubert telling us about a true story about a man who was named Xixi in Brazil. You remember Mr. Xixi? In English, it would be like Mr. P? PP? Mr. PP? And why? Purposely. And he was a great spiritist in Brazil. If he still is, I'm not so sure. He's the president of a federation in Brazil. We don't even want to say, where it is. Don't Google. Forget about it, because he's good. But the story is his father had a problem. You know. Yeah, exactly. And then when the child was born, out of some inner conflict, he named the child Mr. Shishi. Shishi. Beep, beep. It's really out of inner conflict. And then we impose on our children our own conflicts. But we know, probably these books tell us about what's on the behind the scenes.
This does not happen in Brazil anymore. It's been about 10 years that the law changed.
The law changed?
Yeah, and the offices that register the
They don't
kids
approve.
don't approve any ridiculous name or any name that's unembarrassing.
So now in the law, it's now legal that they don't approve it's an embarrassing name. But still, I mean.
Because there was a man, he did not know, he had many kids and he never got them birth certificate. He went to the office once, he was able to go in the city and register all of them. And he did not know what name he would give to the kids. He just cut in the words on a wall like Xerox, photocopy, and he named all the kids like that.
Oh my
with
God.
those names. And then since that time,
They never stopped. That's crazy.
The children of baby Consuelo, they all changed their names, if I'm not mistaken.
They did?
Yeah, because she
Really?
named one Isabelle.
Isabelle?
Isabelle. And then she went to buy a ticket. And then she said, you write the Z like in zebra.
Mm.
And the person in Brazil answering the phone sent the thing to the house. Mrs. Zebra Gomez. That's the
Zebra?
Yeah. She went the next week
Oh
and
my
changed her
God.
name. Because everybody was like bullying her at school.
Oh, God.
Like she was saying.
It's like revenge on the spirits will reincarnate with us,
but
probably.
this kind of problem, when you grow up in Brazil, you can change your name when it's embarrassing.
Great.
Not the last name, but the name. The first and second.
Great. It took a while because this message came along like a while ago, almost like 50 years ago. And it's like 10 years, so it took a while for them to be coherent with civility, we would say. This would be civility. But we would say that giving our children an opportunity to be in the social networks would be aligned with the law of society. So it's not wrong to be there, to have an email account, to have a cell phone when the proper age comes along. I mean, a 5-year-old does not need a cell phone. A 7-year-old does not need a cell phone. Pediatricians say. And Randy Kale in the Kardec radio show said, you don't need it, and if you claim they need it because you need to contact them, that's poor parenting skills. You didn't need them before? Why do you need them now? Cell phone's not a babysitter. It's not going to rescue anybody when they are in trouble. So we're exposing them to social networks, to the media, is a natural thing of the law society. We're supposed to expedite these connections, to make more friends. Jesus said, make more friends. But friends, real friends, not this BFF. The other day I heard a child who's 7 saying, oh, she said she's going to be my BFF. And she didn't know. She didn't know what it stands for. And she said, BFF forever, because she didn't know what it meant. And the parents, they think it's okay. I mean, it's okay as long as you know. Do you know what BFF means? Do you know what a friend means? Friend, what is to be a friend? We need to teach our children. What is to be a friend? Not to go to the extreme of, don't bring your friends here. Let me see. If I don't like them, they're not going to be your friends. But why? Because I don't like them. But they're not your friends, Mom, Dad. That's extreme. From, okay, whatever, if you like them, bring them on. And no, there is something that we talk about supervising, keeping track, guiding. It's like, do you know what a friend is? Because I tell you, a friend is this, that, and the other. You may have many things in common today. Maybe in 10 years you won't have those things in common. That's okay. You don't have to be enemies. But you don't have to be friends either forever. Are you ready? Because many suffer because friendships transform themselves and nobody prepares them for it. And they hold on to grudges uselessly because nobody taught them or guided them that it's okay. It served a purpose there, and now we moved on to another step. Maybe we're going to meet again in the future because Spiritism says we're destined to maintain these connections for future lifetimes. We do. Why do we get into the elevator with those people or not others? The spirits say there's no chance. There must be something between us and them. What do? We just say nothing, or we should at least pray? Or when we drive in a roadway with many cars that have many people inside, why we're there with them and not other people? Is it by chance? No. Is it simply because coincidentally we got there at the same time? No. Is it by chance that this neighbor is this neighbor and I am the other neighbor and not other people? Is it by chance that we're here at this time and not another time? That we're here together now and not other people were here? Why? Because nothing is by chance, and there's no simple answer to this, such as, oh, because we like the same thing. According to what the spirits tell, it's so well put together. Think about it. So it's okay to exist, to let our child into this new world. It belongs to the law of society that is in the Spirit's book. But how? How is the question? We should have what we call a spiritual social etiquette. We need to teach our children, like we teach them how to eat, hopefully. Hopefully we teach them how to eat. Hold the fork this way and not that way. Hold the knife this way. When you're going to cut the meat, you change and you hold this way. When you sit down at somebody's home, you don't go and slouch at a couch or the chair. You sit down this way and you talk that way. We also need that etiquette, but a spiritual, social etiquette for our children to be in this, exposed to this media, and especially to this social networking. The do's and don'ts. Not because we prohibit, but because it's the best for them. Because they can carry those dramas of what happens there their whole lives. They can make decisions, professionally speaking, depending on that social networking. Science already tells in statistics that these kids, they are making their professional choices according to what they're exposed in the media, and especially social networking. And we're letting them, oh, okay, yeah, talk to your friends on Facebook. I don't care. Show your pictures. You go to the hairstylist, boom, take a picture, show to everybody else, and it's like, and then they start talking about profession, college choices. Oh, but everybody there on Facebook is telling they're going to do their MBA. But I want to be, somebody told me this recently, but I want to be a nurse. But everybody else is doing this. So, what do you want? Nurse. But everybody, and you? don't go for what everybody else is doing, because Jesus didn't. When his own mother, when he was a teenager, was worried about him, his future, wanted to secure his future by bringing him to the important career of a rabbi, to become a rabbi. He said, Mom, no. And there's nothing wrong being a rabbi at the time. But he said, no. My best school is here. And he didn't do this because of himself. He did to show to us, you don't do what everybody else does. You don't secure your future by doing what everybody else does. And just a slightly personal note, remember when I chose to become a psychologist, some people saying, but you're never going to earn much money. I'm glad my family never raised me in that mentality. Spiritism saves us. Imagine how different our career could have been if we were going to do what everybody else was doing. Probably wouldn't be here. Life would be very different. So, it doesn't matter what everybody else does. We need to teach the do's and don'ts. And is it a problem really for them to be exposed? Let us listen from André Lewis, that they're exposed to this much media. Do never give them any gift, he says, that may give them an opportunity to be aggressive or belligerent, both in toys and in publications. He was so ahead of the future, because when he says publication, he's talking about internet too. Don't give them a toy or anything that is going to give them an opportunity to bring that aggressiveness out, because it is still in us. And this life, we're supposed to tame it, to domesticate it, and not to say, yeah, be yourself, kick and scream. Both in toys, like people give children a gun, or games that have violence, or computers that they can easily browse in the internet besides games and bring that aggressiveness out. And aggressiveness is not about wars only. In the feminine, aggressiveness is that crazy sensuality. That is aggressive. That sensuality that really shocks people. That is aggressive also for women. What we learn nowadays coming from Hollywood is very aggressive. This is André Luiz. You can read there in Portuguese. Conduta espírita perante a criança. Spiritist conduct before children. Should we then allow them? André Luiz says, do not allow children to participate in meetings or parties that spoil their feelings. This message is unbelievable. Do not allow them to participate in meetings or parties that spoil their feelings. If Facebook is spoiling their feelings, if they're becoming depressive, oh, but everybody else is doing it, I'm not. Shut it down. Say, look, this is sick, toxic for you. Don't go there. What are you gaining from it? Spoiling your most important feelings? Is that adding to your life? Because parents have a mission to lead children to God, says St. Augustine. And if we're not leading our children to God, we're failing. And the Spirit say in the Spirit's book, if we fail, we're going to give account. If they come back and they are not better than they were before, they are just the all about me generation, we failed. So we need to multiply this message to people with kindness, because not necessarily they will understand in the words we're sharing here. When Jesus talked amongst the disciples, he talked in a way that was different from the general public. But that's the reality. These meetings and parties can be virtual as well. On TV. Like if they are watching a program that is inciting them to ill feelings, should we allow? They say, do not allow. Period. Do not allow. Let's go back once. Do never. It's probably like never give them any gift. Never give them. He says never, meaning never ever. Ever. Oh, but it's just once. They just want to play Call of Duty once. That's all you need for them to be addicted forever. And they say Facebook is the most addictive social network of all, because it plays with that narcissistic feeling inside of us. It does play. When there is that like, oh, how many people like? Oh, not everybody liked, and the children may come and say, oh, but I placed there and they didn't like it as much as my other friend who placed a picture of that dog, and they didn't like my dog as much. Only 10 people liked, and 50 people liked their picture. It's tricky. It's spoiling the feelings of our children. So should also we use social networking as a reward to our children, saying, you're being grounded for 1 week. No Facebook, no internet, no TV, no texting your friends, because some parents do this to ground their children. No cell phone for 1 week. But if you, either as a punishment or as a reward, or they say the opposite, if you get A's, then I'm going to give you your iPad so you can go into your Facebook, talk to your friends, do instant messaging, etc., etc. André Luiz was so ahead of his time, probably knowing where we would be today. He says, refrain from promising to children who study any award or gift as reward or false stimulus, so they achieve success at school, thus avoiding to vitiate their minds. Can you believe it? This thing like, I'm going to give $100 if you go to the end of this year and you pass to another grade, $100. And they go study for $100. Or for the iPad. Yes, I'm going to give you a bike, your car for teenagers, if you enter college. André Luiz saying, don't do that. And he opened his parentheses and says, false stimulus. It's false. Because you're turning something that should be intrinsic, you're turning it into an extrinsic motivation. And science already tells that those who have their careers or lives based on extrinsic motivation, they will be depressed because they work for the money, not because they like. Because there are people who work because they like, and they earn their money.
What do you do when you don't do that for the school days?
It's wrong. Okay, I have to repeat because Daniel is asking. So what if we don't go by this system, but our current schools, we go, but school doesn't. They give like, oh, you see, I got like a smiling face, stars, and this and that.
There's a prize every
I know.
Friday.
And there are some schools that are more than Friday. They have every day at every class. Teachers are encouraged to every class be always rewarding children. According to Kardec, According to Spiritism, according to André Lewis, it's wrong. No wonder our educational system is failing.
What do you do as a parent then?
Hmm?
What do you do as a parent then?
Teach them what Wayne Dyer did. Wayne Dyer taught it to his children. Much like what our parents as Spiritists taught. You get it, but you explain at home. It doesn't mean anything. They're doing this because there are kids that don't have good parents. So they need to push at school. So when you see that somebody's doing this, that is in need of that star, bring that name home. We're going to pray for that kid. But don't say anything. Just respect. Give Caesar what is Caesar's and God what is God's. If we can, we help change the system. But we cannot tell our kids to be rebellious. But we can teach them, look, like Wayne Dyer did. It's a beautiful, I forgot which talk he gave. That, yeah, it's the CD that he talks about the Lao Tzu philosophy. Forgot now. Oh, change your life, change your thoughts, change your life. He talks about how he taught his child, his daughter. Yeah, it's similar in that line of thought, but those are thoughts. And he talks about how he taught his child, saying, look, you respect, but this doesn't mean anything. Because you're studying for immortality. You're not studying, it's not a favor to me. It's not a favor to me. Spiritism would say, this is not a favor you're doing to anybody. Oh, you see, Mom? Great. Keep on the good work. Keep it up. We're not going to say, yeah, it's your obligation, because that's also bad parenting. Saying, yeah, it's just your obligation. You're a student, good, obligation. No, good parents say, good, keep it up. Good direction. But it doesn't depend on the teacher. But if we can change it, right, Stephanie? If we can do something to change it, because it must be changed. And it takes awareness to change. But it takes also people, as we're studying on Thursday. The Spirit Manuel Flodimena de Miranda says the worst thing in our society is mental laziness. And that's why we're in trouble. We're mentally lazy. We don't want to be pushed. We don't want to walk an extra mile. We want people to raise us in their arms and walk for us. And that's how it's happening. But it's going to change. As you know, we're changing it. But it's important for us to know that there's no reward by saying, oh, if you have good school grades, then you're going to watch TV. It's complicated. So what to do to wrap it up? Because we could be here forever. But this is just based on the teachings. No personal opinion. What do we do? He says we should encourage them to instruct themselves with good books. Good books mean edifying books. Books that build a new character. That boost their inner character. And he says the edifying book vaccinates the children's mind against evil. Good parents will push their children to read good books that will vaccinate them against evil. Because as we adults already know, when it comes to adulthood, it's like exam time. And if we don't prepare our children, they're going to fail. And we're going to be failing with them. We're going to cry together. It's enough how much we already cry to have them cry and us crying with them. So they say, begin with a good book. No wonder we have many books. Teenagers can already read all of these books. Because if teenagers were mediums of these books, they can read all these books. Our children need children's books, but there are many more. And we can break them down to our children as well in little stories. And the internet has great stories as well. But the little great Chico, Xavier, that is a cartoon we need to pray every day that they succeed in completing, because it's great, isn't it? That's going to help our children, right? Imagine the cartoon that they are putting together, these great minds that I don't even know the name, the little great Chico, teaching children about the best in their ability. It's on each one of us to pray that they release it, because they're going to teach us what to do, how to teach our children about how to expose yourself to this much media. When I see a Vogue magazine, should I buy it in order to know how I should dress up? But many do. Should I tell my child what Joanna de Angelis says in the Happy Life book? Fashion is passing. Don't enslave yourself by the fashion. Because one day is this way, another day. The problem is the way we dress tells about what we are attracting, what we are willing to attract. And that may be a problem for us. Sometimes we do dress up when we are not aware, especially when we are younger. We're not aware. Nobody tells us, not even Spiritists, because nobody teaches Spiritists about this. But we need to tell one another. And then we tailor it around. It's not that now we're going to dress up like people who live in the mountains, in the convents. But we're going to teach our children, don't enslave yourself. Don't cry because you don't have the clothes that everybody else you think has. Because only the models have those clothes. Your neighbor doesn't. Your friends don't. And you're dying for it.
And the clothes have pins on the back.
And they have pins on the back that you don't see. Exactly. Or because they take a picture today, it's their birthday, they say, you see, I got my iPad. Say that you don't love me, because if you loved me, you would give me my iPad. And it can be a nightmare. We're laughing, but it can be, we know, it can be a nightmare, because they think their self-esteem is connected to it. Chico Xavier is an example for us, because he didn't go by those standards. And he succeeded. Don't we want to succeed? Friends, sooner or later, life is going to, the bell is going to ring, and it's going to say, your time is up. And that time, we may not have time to undo or redo or do something. The time is now. The best parent is the one who teaches about immortality. Behavior that can be sustained in immortality. So the first thing, we need to be aware of the new times. This thing about, I don't know about Facebook. If your child has a Facebook, you have to have one. You have to have an account to monitor, to know what's going on. Until they are adults. When they are 18, 21, okay, I taught you, I'm still here, guiding you, but now, you're on your own. But we need to have one. There's no other way.
Some parents have Facebook, but the children doesn't find them as a friend. So
I know.
She don't invite you.
There is a sign.
She don't invite you. She doesn't invite
But
you.
I trust her. I trust her. They see behind her back.
You have connections.
Sitting over you.
No, I see behind her back what she is watching.
Yeah, it's very complex. Good parents already know, but it's important to be aware that we cannot change and say, this generation is crazy. It is moving forward, because now we are making friends in parts of the world that we wouldn't be able to do if it were not for the social networks. But how are we using this? The most critical thing is when we see Spiritist adults behaving like kids. That is a problem. Our kids behaving as kids is expected. Our teenagers behaving as teenagers is expected. But not the adults behaving like teenagers. And the worst I've seen, and I'll say this purposely, because we are in a moment of deep awareness, is people who are Spiritist leaders, who are Spiritist speakers, who are Spiritist directors of centers in the world, behaving like high school kids. They know the world doesn't, majority of people in some parts of the world don't have food. And they are there showing a big banquet of food. What for? Would Jesus do this? Would Chico Xavier do this? It's very unlikely. It's not coherent. So we need to be, or even the expressions we talked about, BFF, they use. Like, oh, this is my BFF. It's like, okay. But we need to be aware that the times exist. It's inevitable that they're exposed to the much media, the television, and all the social networking through phones, iPads, and computers, etc., internet in general. We need to participate. There is no way. Participate respecting their age group, but knowing, like, you know, you can always be more spiritually attuned and build safety rules for them. Because I've got to know, in the Virginia group, we have a police officer who works with human trafficking, right? They say human trafficking. And I've got to know something I didn't know. That this is really something that is happening at rates that we didn't even expect. Human trafficking. And many of these people use social networks. We need to protect our children. We're not even talking about the pedophiles, etc. We're talking about those that use, especially girls, but not only. And they come in this and then our children go very naively, put their picture out there, and they are searching, just like foxes in the forest, for the next rabbit that they're going to attack. And maybe our children. And we need to tell our children, you don't know the world. Read the gospel to them. This earth is still in trials and atonements. You're not living in Jupiter yet. Because in Jupiter, these things don't exist. But on Earth, we need to bring them safety. And we're not even talking about that, but amongst their friends, when we read these books here, you don't need to go beyond these 2 books by Emmanuel. 2,000 years ago, 50 years later, Emmanuel describes how envy and jealousy amongst the closest relationships can destroy people's lives. Spite, envy, jealousy. The closest people to us. We need to protect our children. Not overprotect, but saying, look, always think twice. Why do you have this friend? Why do you open up your life to that person? You may be at risk when you least imagine. It's not to raise them in fear, but in reality. And build, I think this is the most important thing here that Spiritism teaches us. To teach our children about their immortality. Build this immortal dialogue that we see. When we read these books, we learn how to talk to people, our children, one another, in that immortal perspective. there's always an opportunity. I'll give an example, just so we clarify, if I didn't make myself clear. In the book 50 Years Later, when Father Damien is talking to Celia, they are eating. He always brings something that is inspirational, immortal, enlightening. Every conversation, there is some feature, some moment, not Father Damien, I'm sorry, it's about the grandfather, Cneo Lucius. Cneo Lucius with Celia, they're always exchanging. And later, when he is deceased, he's the one that keeps on guiding her. This is the immortal relationship, but it must begin here. We need to talk to our children every moment in a more edifying way. Always. And the worst thing is when we keep our children here in the physical senses. We need to nurture our spiritual senses while nurturing our children's spiritual sense. Because that we take for life. We are from generation that believed, our parents, grandparents, that the best thing is to nourish the body. If I can give you the best food, the best school, the best clothes, especially the food, we're good parents. Nowadays, it's about the food for the soul. How much are we really nourishing our kids daily? How much spiritual food are we giving them daily? Because they are daily being exposed to this. Can we counterbalance it? How? By talking to them. Not lecturing, but teaching them like André Luiz does. Teaching them to see the connection between two worlds. Teaching them that when they are watching a program, there is something that they can evaluate. What am I gaining here? Is it making me feel good? Is it boosting my feelings to the better? Or is it making me feel unsettled, anxious, depressed? Turn it off. You turn on Facebook. How is it making you feel? You do text messaging. What for? Can you enhance this conversation to some other level other than the superficial level? This is about the A Spiritist View on this media monitoring. We need to participate with that type of dialogue. That's why these books are very inspirational. It's good sometimes to reread, to see how the mentors are always teaching André Luiz, no, observe André. And then it's teaching us as parents and educators how to do the same with our children. How to do the same with the children that we're responsible, whether we are babysitters, teachers, father, mother, aunts, uncles, close relatives. It doesn't matter. If we have a role, there's always an opportunity. Even if it's brief, it's unforgettable. And we need to keep that in mind. Much like what our friend Godinho did. And that's how we're going to end up the story, retelling the story to our friends who are going to watch it later, because majority of you already know. His take. His son was 11 years old. Now he's my age. But not much older. Not much older, right? But he was quite young and found out he had diabetes. It can't be harder than that for children who like candies and sweet, to know that they cannot have anything sweet. They have to monitor their sugar levels at 11. But as a good parent, you know it's not by chance, right? As a good spiritist, we know it's not by chance. That limitation comes as a blessing in disguise. And Godinho knew it. But one day they were shopping, doing grocery shopping, at their beach house in that area. And at the end, when they were going to the cashier, the security guard approached and revealed that his 11-year-old boy had something in the pocket. He denied it. Godinho kept himself composed. And the security guard repeated, "Sir, he has something in his pocket." You see how spirits, the mentors, are there. The true educators are the guardian angels. And they are counting on us to bridge it up. And you're like, repeat it. The guy repeated. Godinho said, "Son, please give it back." He took the candies out of the pocket, put it on the cashier's desk. Godinho didn't say anything. They left. It took them a while to get home, but in the pathway, going home, in their way, he asked his wife to take the other children and keep going. While he was going to talk to his child, he talked to his child. Almost like giving a lecture. In that line of thought, the immortal dialogue. And his child said to us, saying, "Yeah, Vanessa, it was hard. It's like a spiritist lecture that day. He talked about reincarnation. He talked about, we know our tendencies of the past that are coming along this life and this and the other." He was only 11. And Godinho kindly was saying, "Son, you know, we're not reborn. The incarnation is not a vacation. It's not by chance that it's happening to you, that you have diabetes. But when you don't have something and you get it anyways, something of the past is coming full force. You need to know it, to tame it, to change it. For when you grow as an adult, you don't incur in the same mistakes as in previous lives. Because we're living this life to avoid the same mistakes. Meaning, we're going to go through the same situations, and it's likely we're going to fail again. The Messengers. By Andrea Lewis talks about that. He thought it was enough. But Godinho, as an excellent parent, and I don't say this because I know more, because only those who know more judge say, good parent. I'm not a good parent. I don't know, but I think he is a good parent because he didn't stop himself there. He went another level. I'm going to make sure you never forget about it for your own benefit. Many parents would be like, "Oh, poor son. You want to have candy, right? Oh, it's not fair you have diabetes." Overprotection, overindulgence doesn't help. Godinho was not like that. He was a spiritist parent. What did he do? He made sure he never forgot that he should refrain those impulses forever. So he said, "Son, what do you like the most when you come to the beach house?" "Well, going to the beach with my brothers." "Okay. 2 months we're going to be here. 2 months you're not going to go to the beach." Being at the beach house, not going to the beach, having 2 other brothers, brothers and a sister. Too harsh. No. 30 years later, actually, he then comes to us and said, "Thank God my dad did that to me, because today I work for the Brazilian Federal Police. It's like the Brazilian FBI, where there is a lot of corruption. And oftentimes, people try to bribe us, but we I don't go into that. Because I always remember of that very strong experience. Who succeeded? The child, but the father did as well. Because now in this social exposure, he knows the north. He has a GPS. Question. We end today with a question. Are we programming well the GPS, the moral, ethical GPS of our children? End of the story. Because it's now meditation time. It's time for us to meditate because the spirits have a lot, and we would recommend for those who read Portuguese to go to the book, Conduta Espírita, read the whole message. Perante a criança. Now, let us stop here and prepare the time for the passes, for us, for the children.